From beach renourishment to parking, those are some of the issues that Isle of Palms Mayor Phillip is tackling. I talk one-on-one with the mayor for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Isle of Palms Mayor Phillip, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Hey, Quintin, good morning. Thanks so much for reaching out and getting us scheduled again.
Oh, yes, sir. I'm bringing you back on Quintin's Close-Ups again because obviously the big announcement on the island is that you're running for re-election as mayor.
Big may be an overstatement, but yeah, that has happened. So our filing period actually starts this Friday and runs through early September. So we'll see what happens.
You'll see what happens. So why Isle of Palms Mayor? Why again?
Quintin, 4 years has really been a blink, to be quite honest with you. And you think in the municipality world, there's so many pieces and partners, and permitting takes forever on the projects that we have done. I feel like we've done some pretty significant progress and pretty significant projects in 4 years, but there are just a number of things that I would love to see finish and come to fruition and just kind of keep some of the momentum that we've had going for the last 4 years.
And I want to jump into that in just a second, but what are those projects that you want to keep the momentum on right now?
Yeah, Quintin, there's one that we have actually been talking about, before my time even. It's a huge drainage project that runs along the marsh side of the island, the intercoastal side. And, it's coordinated with the Department of Transportation and Wild Dunes Harbor Golf Course. They've got a renovation going on right now, and we're trying to piggyback, some of their time that they're shut down from a golf course standpoint. That's going to protect probably 1,000 homes on the island if we can create this flood barrier, either from stormwater or tidal inundation. You remember back to the nor'easter we had in 2023, and just a lot of water on the island everywhere at that point. So that's probably one of the biggest projects that I would love to see us get completed, and that's going to be a multi-phase project. First phase is actually kicking off hopefully next week. Quintin, we've talked about the need for a new city hall here. This one, the building we're in, and you've seen it built, early 90s. We've looked at renovating, we've looked at expanding, we looked at new locations. So that one's going to be, that one takes some more work, but I would love to see us at least get that one started and down a path. And Quintin, job one for municipal government is fiscal responsibility, and we've made significant progress, in my opinion, from a financial standpoint, and I would just love to see us continue that for another 4 years.
And I want to talk to you about that fiscal responsibility just a second as well. But obviously you talk about that project that's going on between the Wild Dunes Golf Resort and, of course, the state government. So where exactly do you want those storm barriers to be ideally?
Yeah, so again, it's multi-phase, Quintin, and the golf courses has been shut down for a number of months and will be shut down for a few more months. So there's some infrastructure we will actually build on the golf course with Wild Dunes permission, which they've been a great partner with us to get this done. They see the benefit for the city. There's some benefit for them as well, too, with the elevated golf cart paths and such. So some of that infrastructure will actually go on the golf course, the barrier will, and then some of that infrastructure will go on the right-of-way when we complete the new path next year. That path runs from 21st Avenue to 41st Avenue currently and is in pretty poor shape and has been for some time. So we're going to elevate, widen that, but most of the infrastructure will go either in the right-of-way, on the path, or on the golf course.
You talk about that infrastructure that's being built on the golf course with permission with the Wild Dunes. Will they be able to give you all help you all with that infrastructure?
The piece that is part of our project, Quintin, the city's certainly paying for that. The resort is spending roughly $8 million to renovate the golf course through a number of projects they have going on. But the pieces that are specific to us, the city will wind up paying for those pieces. Some of it is a berm, some of it is a retaining wall, some of it, a small piece, is a elevated golf cart path. And again, the resort will spend $8 million on their part of it, but our piece on the golf course will be a little bit over $1 million.
Wow.
And now, do you have any more infrastructure, well, financial infrastructure for widening and elevating that path nearby?
Yeah, so that path again, that'll be phase two for us. Hopefully, the first half of next year. So we'll take that to an 8 foot wide path, elevated in places. And when I say elevated, I mean we're probably we're talking 6 inches to a foot. We're not
Right.
talking a huge barrier. Again, most of that's going to go on the golf course side. But this path will be elevated in some spots. We're trying to get that whole middle section of the island to be protected at a 7 foot level, which equates to a little bit, about a 9 foot tide level. So, most of the tides we've had, since they've been recording that, I think there's been 3 or 4 that have been over that number. So we're taking care of, pick a number, 97, 98% of the tides that will be coming in, hopefully, depending on sea level rise. But, so again, it's just a home run project for the island, for the golf course, for the residents in that middle part of the island. So really excited to kick that one off next week.
And are you all planning to put any barriers in any other locations?
Not at this point,
Hmm.
Quintin, from a berm or standpoint. There's one other spot on the island that's a little bit closer in towards City Hall, kind of right behind the Harris Teeter, if you're
Sure.
familiar where that is. That could probably use some, man-made structures, whether it be a berm or a retaining wall that might help, probably 25, 30 residents in that area. So that's certainly on the drawing board. Quintin, one of the things we've completed in the last few years is a drainage master plan for the entire island. So we've got a whole list of projects, that are lined up to help either stormwater drain or, tidal waters coming in. But, the list is long and it just takes money, unfortunately.
Those stormwater drains, Mira, how many of those do you need for this particular project?
So on this particular project, Quintin, some of the work that's happening on the golf course will be piped through the golf course into the marsh, into the intercoastal, and on the end of those pipes, we'll put valves that doesn't lets water out, but doesn't let tide water in. So I think in this first phase, I think there's 6 of those that we'll be putting in to help control the tidal inundation. And then in phase two, when we start working on the path itself, I think there's maybe 2 more that we'll wind up putting in again that helps let storm water out, but not tide water in, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You talk about phase two. Do you all have the money in place for that already?
We do. So this one's fully funded. Quintin, again, it's working around what's going on at the golf course with Wild Dunes from that timing. We have some permitting that we need to do with SCDOT to work on the right of way and the path in phase two. And then phase three will involve, we're going through some critical area in phase three. So that's a different agency that we'll need to do some permitting with there. But again, that's phase three is probably end of next year if everything lines up right.
Yes, sir, absolutely. So when do you expect that permitting to take place for phase three?
Phase three, I would hope we will be in a position to start the permitting process later this year. Some of those permits can take 9 to 12 months to get back to us by the time you do public comment period, and the agency has a time to review what work you're doing. So hopefully we'll have those permits in hand next year and can finish this third phase up at the end of next year. And again, you and I've talked before.
Sure.
We typically don't do construction projects, certainly road projects during tourist season. So really from May to September, we're kind of typically don't do work. Again, some of this is going on the golf course. Some of this is going on right of way, but I'm sure that will affect some of the traffic on that waterway boulevard. So we'll just have to be careful to either not do construction during our tourist season or pretty limited during that time frame.
Now, I want to get to that in just a second as well, but how many right-of-ways will be involved with phase two?
Phase two will be all the way from 21st to 41st Avenue, kind of the current length of the path today. Again, just wider and better, if you will. So that's all DOT right away. We've got some utility lines in there. We've got trees in there. We've got some folks landscaping that's probably encroached over the years that we'll need to take care of. But Again, that'll be first half of next year, Quentin.
Those utility lines, Mayor, will they have the opportunity to bury those lines?
Now that would make logical sense when we've got it torn up, wouldn't it? But that is a very long stretch for Dominion, from 21st, I mean, it's 20 plus blocks that, would need to be buried. And I don't, I just the way things work, one, it's expensive. And two, I just don't see us being able to make that happen while we're doing this project. To your point, logically and, from a resident standpoint, it would certainly make sense why it's all happening in that area of the island. But, it's been hard enough to coordinate DOT and Wild Dunes on the golf course, bring Dominion into play. And, I'm afraid we would never get this project done. That's not a slam on Dominion.
Right,
It's
right,
just
right.
a slow process, and it's very expensive, to underground these utilities, unfortunately.
Now, with those trees, as you know, next door in Mount Pleasant, they actually developed a tree committee. Will you all adopt the same thing on the Alpha Palms?
Yeah, we have an environmental committee that's been in place for, maybe 3 or 4 years, maybe a little more than that. So that's kind of their charge, to make sure we're taking care of the environment, or to bring initiatives to city council that are environmentally focused, Quentin. So that would kind of fall to that current committee for us.
Now, have they brought any initiatives to you all so far?
Yeah, they've brought a number of things. Actually, we voted on one last night at a city council meeting. You and I've had this conversation. We added a new public dock last year. We had the ribbon cutting for that. They came up with the idea, found the contractor, found the graphic artist to put some interpretive signs down there, to talk about the marsh system, to talk about the intercoastal system, to talk about the type of birds, that you may be seeing in that area. So, kind of a fresh example, if you will, that we just approved that last night. So that'll hopefully get put on that new dock this fall. That will put that in place.
And I wanted to get over to the city hall for just a second, but you mentioned tourism season, which wraps up, I guess, Monday.
That's right.
And there's been a lot of rain here, Friday and Saturday. I got drenched and all of that stuff working out here. What was the review of the tourism season this year from a city hall standpoint?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because we are, once again, it just seems like it goes so quick that, school's back in, and Monday's Labor Day, and you kind of, move on to the next phase of the calendar. Quentin, we started off with, if you'll remember way back to Memorial Day, beautiful weekend, awesome weather. There were more people on this island than I think I've ever seen, quite honestly, and it was really hard for folks to get off at the end of the day. You know what it's like when there's gridlock on a good day, and it was a great day. So, that one was a tough start to the season because there were so many people here on the island. People are pent up, for the what we get for the winter season and spring, and they're ready to get to the beach. And we felt it on Memorial Day for sure. But my conversations with our public safety folks, with residents, I think it was a pretty good season. It was busy. This past weekend was, a huge rain event, unfortunately. But I think all in all, I think it was a pretty good season.
Yes, sir. Now how many out of towners did you all have versus in towners?
Yeah, and I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, Quentin, but the traffic counts that come over on a typical weekend, are somewhere in the 20 to 30,000 cars that are coming over. So that has certainly remained steady. So, most of those are, certainly Charleston, the Tri-County area for sure, that are coming over maybe for the day. But between our hotels and our short-term rentals over here, I think they've had a pretty good year from an occupancy standpoint, or a pretty good season. So again, it's a lot of people fitting on a 7 mile island, for 4 or 5 months. But again, I think it was a pretty good season all in all.
All in all, let's hope it continues to October, maybe.
Well, the weather will do that for us, but folks have to get back to school, and life happens to all of us. And the crowds after July 4th, you can definitely start seeing a slowdown in the crowds. Some of the school systems around us start late July, early August, and by the time you get to July 4th, that's really kind of our peak. But August, end of July and August are certainly busy. It's just not quite like June and early July for us.
Wow. And you talk about those short-term rentals, Mayor. So how many of those new ones came online this year?
We've actually had a little bit of reduction from our short-term rental license. There's kind of a constant turnover, if you will, of housing, and something may go from a short-term rental to a second home or to a full-time resident. In Quintin, our numbers have stayed pretty steady over the last 20 or 25 years with regard to the number of active license and short-term rentals that are on the island. It's about 1,400, somewhere between 1,400 and 1,500 are active short-term rental properties. About a little bit more than half of those are in the condo system for us, either in Wild Dunes or on our Front Beach area. But again, those numbers have stayed pretty constant over the years as far as active rental license.
Wow. And you talk about those condos and obviously being a busy season. I know just this past July, there was some sort of consideration for a study to improve traffic on the island and, of course, the Alpha Palms connector. Let me go to Channel 5 because they wrote this. The Alpha Palms is working to find a solution to traffic concerns on the island. The City Council is considering a traffic study to improve transportation throughout the island and the Alpha Palms connector. Jan Anderson, as you know, a council member and a former registered professional engineer with 40 years of experience, is conducting these types of studies. Says the council should pump the brakes on the about 29,500 proposal from one company to conduct the study. Why?
Yeah, and Quintin, we did kind of pump the brakes and slow down a little bit on that. I don't think we're going to gain much if we just did a traffic study of the Isle of Palms. We've had conversations with Mount Pleasant and Sullivan's. This needs to be a regional approach. And, we've only got two ways on and off this island, and almost all of our roads are just 2-lane roads. So I don't think it takes a traffic engineer, quite honestly, to say Isle of Palms has a lot of traffic with very little infrastructure to move it around. When folks are leaving and either going through Sullivan's off of Isle of Palms or off of Sullivan's into Mount Pleasant, off of Isle of Palms into Mount Pleasant, I think that's where there may be some potential pickup for us to have more of a regional approach. I'd love to see the county hop in with us, Quintin, from a financial aspect, because this is not just affecting, the 4,200 full-time residents on Isle of Palms. It's affecting we mentioned those number of cars that are coming over every weekend. And those folks are coming from all over the Tri-County area, maybe further, for a day trip to the beach. And, they're sitting in traffic. This is a broader issue than Isle of Palms. And that's why we kind of stopped and said, we need to do something broader than just our island. If we're going to look at traffic flow, fixes that may need to happen, again, we're going to need SCDOT at the table. I'd love to have the county at the table. Started conversations with Mount Pleasant and Sullivan. So, this is one of those, Quintin, where kind of back to your question about underground and utilities, right. Seems like a logical, quick answer. But when you kind of start thinking through it a little bit more, you need to involve other municipalities, again, the county, the SCDOT, and others. So, we'll hopefully take this fall to start putting some of the guardrails around what that looks like from a study standpoint. Make sure we have buy-in from Mount Pleasant and Sullivan's, and hopefully get the county involved, and just see where we can make a difference from a traffic flow standpoint.
It is. Obviously, I'm probably getting ahead of this potential meeting that you all want to have with the DOT and the county, and of course these other municipalities that we love. But are they going to be? Will they be on board for some sort of retiming of some of these traffic lights? I know it's the only one.
Again, kind of to your point, we only have one. Yeah. Mount Pleasant has many. Sullivan's doesn't have any. Right. I think timing of lights is certainly one of those things that would come out of a study, Quintin. At Rifle Range, at the connector in 17, at Hungry Neck, that's the main artery flow off our island. And, we've had conversations over the years about, do you create the connector bridge to have 2 lanes off? You need some infrastructure to make that happen on the Mount Pleasant side. So we need Mount Pleasant to buy into that, as well as SCDOT. So I think there are multiple things, Quintin, that could get on the recommendation list. But again, it's going to take, a lot of partners at the table and a lot of buy-in from many folks to really affect the change to help traffic flow. And again, that's not that's not on our island. That's really in Mount Pleasant for the most part, and then broader, once you get out of Mount Pleasant into other areas. So I hope that answers your question.
So I still don't want to get ahead of you, Mayor, with the ideas on this. But what should be ideal for the Alpha Palms connector right
Yeah,
now?
yeah. Quintin, we had a vote on council 2 years ago, maybe. The SCDOT had come back with alternative configurations on the bridge part specifically, not talking about all the way up to 17 yet, but just on the bridge part. And council voted for the 2 lanes off of the bridge, just to help traffic flow coming onto the island during season. Yes, it can back up for sure, but that backup's happening all into Mount Pleasant and other areas, and it's a little more staggered than when the departure time is for whatever reason. And you've been out here, when there's been when there's a storm, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it is impossible to get off this island at that point. But even without the rain, folks are typically leaving somewhere between 4 and 7 p.m. So you've got kind of a wide swath of when people are going off this island. In city council, and I was one of those that voted for that. If you could take 2 lanes off the island, I don't think you need them coming on, but 2 lanes off. Would that help traffic flow? Again, there's some infrastructure on the Mount Pleasant side that you need to make that happen from the bridge all the way up to Highway 17. But, those are long-term fixes, Quintin, kind of to your question earlier. Are there some short-term things like signal timing, like having sheriffs or police, directing traffic specifically? Would a roundabout work better at Rifle Range or on the island? I don't think you have the real estate on the island to make that happen. But, again, I don't want to get ahead of it either. But there are things, that have been talked about. There are things that have been put on the table. So, I think if we engaged a traffic engineer to conduct a study and had these other entities and municipalities involved with us, I feel like we could make some headway, but it's going to take a lot of collaboration and teamwork for sure.
And I want to come back to the other side of the island where you are right now, which is City Hall. And I know you mentioned obviously the future of it. Obviously, there's discussions about renovating, expanding it. What should you do right now?
Yeah, so we kind of put that one on pause as well. Just we've had the erosion issue this year, really the last 2 years. That's kind of really taken our focus. We've put a few band-aids on City Hall. We've taken a conference room and made a few offices. We've done some rotted wood repair here and there. It's an old building, Quintin, and we can keep hobbling along, so to speak, and doing the repairs, but. I think we've gotten the life out of this building personally. So, 2 or 3 years ago, we had an architecture firm look at other alternatives for us, whether it was, tearing this one down, renovating this one, expanding this one, or they looked at, I think it was 3 other locations on the island that are city-owned properties or city-owned land where we could move a city hall to. So I think there are, I think we'll pick this back up hopefully first part of next year, depending on what happens with the elections. But, I think we need to strategically think about where we would like City Hall. It's kind of there's a lot of traffic in and out of City Hall, visitors and residents, and it needs to make a nice impression. We need to have a nice workspace for our employees. We need to have, modernized council chambers so we can live stream out, quality meetings and productions and such. And, again, we put in a new AV system in here about 3 years ago, and it's certainly improved, but Quintin, you're still living within the same bones, if you will, of your living room, so to speak. And I just feel like it's time that we need to do something with City Hall to kind of be a showpiece for our community.
And I know you just added some fixes to this old City Hall, which is going back to the '90s. Jeez. But I know down the road in Georgetown, they temporarily moved their City Hall from Front Street over to High Market Street. There,
Yeah.
are you able to do something like that in temporarily?
Again, if we do something in our current location, Quentin, and you're familiar with where City Hall is, if we do something here, that's going to be a tear down and, temporary, trailer offices or some type of rental facility. If we chose, one of the other locations that our consultants have looked at, you could do the construction and then, stay here until that's ready. Um, one of the options we've looked at is our public safety building just a little bit down the road that houses, one of our fire stations and our police staff. There's a little bit of room behind there where we could, kind of make a one-stop shop, if you will, for a resident or a visitor. You have police, fire, parking, city hall. You could kind of have it all in one spot. I mean, one of the things you keep coming back to, Quentin, on the island is parking. That you put City Hall in where our public safety building is currently. Yeah, I think parking is going to be a little bit challenged. I think we could get there, but I think if I'm a newbie, driving up to City Hall trying to figure out where to park and come in, I don't think it's so clean over there. There's just a number of things that we'll need to take into account. Money is obviously one of them. Location, ease of use. Where it makes sense for residents and guests to approach City Hall and take care of whatever business they need to.
Yes, sir. And speaking of which, obviously all of that's nearby the beachfront. Do you all, as a city, actually have plans to update your local comprehensive beach management plan?
So we just did that, Quentin, and got approval on that. I want to say last year, maybe
Okay,
2024.
sure.
So that one's done. We are also just about finished updating our comprehensive plan. That one's probably 97% of the way done, so we're pretty close there. So our beach management plan, we're good for another 5 years, I think it is.
Wow. Any, what are the biggest differences with this new updated comprehensive plan?
So, comprehensive plan is kind of a living document, if you will, that tackles a lot of pieces around the community. I haven't seen the finished product yet, Quentin. But between the comprehensive plan, we've had a community enrichment plan completed earlier this year, which was really about managing tourism with the help of Explore Charleston and David McNair and College of Charleston. So we put that in place. There's probably 150 recommendations from that group that we're, putting in a matrix along with the comprehensive plan. We had a beach ad hoc committee earlier this year finish up, and there's a number of recommendations that City Council needs to tackle with that. So our staff is putting together a matrix of all these recommendations from these critical documents, strategy documents that we've had over the last few years, and either assigning them to a committee, just tracking them through completion. And, that's one of the things high on my list for the next 4 years too, is, creating a long-term strategy with this comprehensive plan, with the beach ad hoc committee recommendations, with our community enrichment plan. We have a sea level rise plan. Quentin, there's just a number of pieces. Okay, now we've gotten all these consultants around the table with us to help us study all this and give us recommendations. Now we need to get about implementing and prioritizing what needs to happen, and at the same time, you can't take your eye off the ball from running the city, taking care of the beach, taking care of the 20 plus thousand people that come over, on a weekend day. So, it's just a balancing act and a prioritization that needs to happen with our comprehensive plan, along with the others I mentioned.
And what recommendations from that comprehensive plan that will be implemented immediately?
Um, there's not much in that comprehensive plan, quite honestly. That's an immediate check mark. Unfortunately, a lot of those are really longer term projects, like some of our drainage and sewering more of the island. Some of those pieces that kind of stay on a comprehensive plan, if you will, because they're never really done. Yeah. So off the top of my head, again, I haven't seen the finished product, but I don't know that there's going to be much out of the comprehensive plan that we'll be able to complete very quickly.
Alva Palms Mayor Phillip Pounds, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
All right, Quentin, have a great rest of your week.
Likewise.